Welcome to Vicious Whispers with Mark Tullius, your source for horror, sci-fi, suspense, and all things violent. Welcome to Vicious Whispers with Mark Tullius, your source for horror, sci-fi, suspense, and all things violent.
Thank you so much for joining me today on Vicious Whispers with Mark Tullius. Today, at the end of the episode, we will share Going Dark, a story from Somber Stroll. But first, we have a very special guest. He is the founder of the nonprofit for CTE by CTE. I discovered him just recently through a support group that I joined. He encouraged me to share a video that I made about my recent road rage incident, and that is CTE and brain injury global support. It's been awesome since I've been in there. I love it, but I wanted to bring him on so he could talk about CTE, how he got involved in it, why it's important to him. Thank you so much, Rico Petrini, for joining me today. I really appreciate you coming on.
Yeah, thanks for having me. I really appreciate the platform and spread some more awareness. So it's a great opportunity. Thank you.
So first, I'd like to hear about your story. You know, growing up, what sports did you play? How did CTE even get on your radar? It's not something that people want to dedicate parts of their life to, it's not something that a lot of, especially, athletes probably aren't that interested in it. So tell me a little bit about your story, whether or not you had concussions and why this is important to you.
Yeah, thanks. So my history is I was one of those hyperactive kids that my mom wanted to keep out of the house. So, I was pretty much a four-sport athlete. Summer, spring, winter, fall, I was in something. Usually early on it was soccer and baseball. So didn't really have much exposure to head contact then. And then I lived on the coast in California. So did a little, surfing and boogie boarding in between to kind of keep busy. I really didn't get into any contact sports until freshman year of high school. And I tried out for the football team and, had never played before really other than street ball. So got into that and did pretty well and just, tried to act like a madman out there to, win my spot. And they stuck me at inside linebacker and that's where I stayed. So played 4 years at Sarah High School in San Mateo, the school that Tom Brady went to, and Lynn Swan, Barry Bonds. So it's got some pretty good pedigree behind it. So played there 4 years, started, and was fortunate enough to get a scholarship to Oregon State. So went up to the Pacific Northwest, played in Corvallis, chose Oregon State. I had actually about 100 and something schools offer me scholarships, but I was really excited about Oregon State because they told me I would play right out the gate and they didn't lie. My freshman year, I started and I played all 4 years there at inside linebacker. So, one of the best leagues in the nation, very competitive, some big linemen. So, there's a couple times going against 315-pound linemen. It was pretty regular occasion. I was only about 215 at the time, so quite a mismatch, but really had a great time. A lot of great guys there, met a lot of great friends, but that is really where the concussions really kicked in. Now, I had a few in high school. I had one in particular where it was so bad that my arm started floating. I didn't know till actually a few months ago that an arm stinger or floater is related to neural damage and concussion. So that actually was something I didn't even know until recently. So that was an early indicator that I had done some, early damage in high school. But this one particular instance, I remember getting knocked pretty hard, went to the sideline, saw the trainer. She just straight took my helmet and they, told me to sit out, and I was going down the line trying to find somebody else's helmet that would fit so I could get back out there. So, we just didn't know a lot at that time. You just thought, okay, I bumped my head. I got my bell rung, you didn't realize that I know how crazy it sounds now because we have come a long way with the science. But at that point, if you didn't see blood or a bone wasn't sticking out, you got back out there and played. And that's the sad part about head injuries is you really don't realize how much damage you're doing, especially as a 14-year-old kid, you have no idea. So I had probably 3 or 4 concussions in high school that were pretty serious. That was the most serious, but in college is where I really racked them up. In practice, we did full contact every single day. They're only doing 15 minutes a week now. So that tells you the change. In addition to that, we were doing things like what's called Oklahoma drill, where it's basically line two guys up like crash up derby and run them at each other from 15 yards out, and collide. We did ISO drill where a fullback's taking on a linebacker, at full speed. I mean, these were the kinds of collisions that were kind of made the practice. Everybody got around, and that's where you kind of proved yourself. But that's also where you got most of your concussions. So I was at a point where I was taking about 1,600 milligrams of Advil a day because I was having just excruciating headaches almost all the time. I would get out at practice and I get through the first set of hitting drills, and I had a corner on the field in the grass where I would go puke. And I would puke just from the dizziness and the headache. And then I would get back out there and play some more. And everybody kind of laughed it off. There goes Rico's lunch, and I'd get back in line and go do my thing. In games, I never got pulled out except for one game. It was against Cal. And first half, I had like 14 tackles and was having a phenomenal game. But on punt team, we watched the video after, and I was literally running in circles in the middle of the field, just not having any clue what I was supposed to be doing. So they took me at halftime and did a concussion check on me. And I was calling the team doctor dad and, ask him about my pretty shoes. And I gave this really dramatic crying speech to the team to try to pump them up, and just was completely out of it. So that got me a trip to the hospital and had observation. But at that time, they actually told you to have a parent or somebody be there and wake you up every hour, which we now know is really bad, but that's what happened. And by the next morning, we had film study, and I was in watching film. And that evening we had shells and helmets for practice, and I was back out practicing. So literally didn't even take a day off, not even 24 hours. I had a lot of concussions like that were pretty serious, where guys would have to tell me where to line up. Instinctively, I knew how to play the game, so you could fake it real well. I could pass concussion protocols. They could ask you the basic dumb questions, and anybody can pass that. But it got to a point where, like I said, I just didn't have a clue at times what was going on, or, and my guys were bumping me into where I needed to be, or told me what gap I was supposed to go hit. And they just said, oh, that's Rico, and it just kind of got taken as that was part of my goofy personality. But, I look back now and see that was some very obvious symptoms that I had more going on. In fact, with that Advil at 17 years old, I had a huge hole in my stomach because it had burned a hole from the amount of Advil I'd been taking. So one of the things that should have been a flag for me is during my last season in fall camp, we were doing doubles, and we hit morning and afternoon. And I had the break at lunch, and I was with my roommate, and we were both laying in our beds, and I actually had a seizure, and was, pretty bad one. And he was trying to figure out what was going on with me. And I turned to him and I just said, don't tell the coaches, I don't want to sit out, because you want to start, you want to play, you don't want to lose your opportunity. And, looking back, I can't believe how dumb that was, but just didn't know,
Would you have cared? I was very self-destructive. I wanted to play. I wanted to be famous. I wanted to, whether it was football or fighting or boxing or whatever, I didn't care about any damage. It's like, I kind of like, okay, yeah, there's a chance. But, so even if you knew at that point, do you think, because that was probably your identity, that was probably your life, would you have stopped playing knowing that, yeah, maybe I am screwing up my brain?
That's a great question. Knowing the information that we know now, I think I would have taken a harder look at things, and I probably would have taken some more time off. I definitely would have taken some practices off to let myself heal. The second impact syndrome, I don't know how, frankly, I'm here with the amount of concussions I had back to back in practices and stuff that I played on and never really fully recovered from. So, there were some serious risks. I got lucky. I wouldn't say anything I did was smart, but at the same time, it was that time. I mean, there's right now a couple concussion suits about that time, and we're trying to look at them through the goggles of today. And what you need to do is you need to go back to 1995 and realize the only thing the NCAA cared about were steroid tests and whether you flunked out and whether you had a side job that you were making money. You know that. I mean, they didn't care about anything else regarding your quote student athlete. You
Yeah.
know, I mean, that was the only things I ever saw the NCAA for. We never got a handout, we never saw a video. You know, if they did something like driver's ed where they had a red asphalt kind of video and said, hey, this is your brain, this
Yeah.
is your brain on football, you know, might have woke some people up and might have thought twice. The ideal tackling approach for me was you take your face mask and you put it right under their chin, you know, and my kids watch some of my video now and they go, wow, you would have gotten ejected from basically every game because the way you hit.
Mhm.
And that's how we were taught, you know? So I'm thankful that things are changing. I just hope to see more change. I think a lot of people are afraid that the game's going to get soft or we're going to go to two-hand touch or you can't have the same level of play. And I totally disagree with that. I think there's a lot of safety measures that could be put in and still have the same game, you know, and just be smarter about it.
Yeah, 100%. So now, when did you try out for the NFL? Were you already having too many issues? And then when did you really start to notice symptoms and put it together like, oh man, this must be from that?
Yeah, so great question. I was all Pac-10 and team MVP my senior year, so I had a really good outing. I think I was number 2 in the Pac-10, 125 tackles or something like that. I had been talking to Cleveland and Kansas City and actually got an open invite to the 49ers. So I went down to Santa Clara to their camp there, and you know, they have access. That's where you learn that, you know, in college, I think you play for your school and you play for the student section and all these other, you know, things that are, you know, these dream things, you know, the unicorn kind of fantasy. And in, you know, NFL, you learn real quick it's a business. It's not about playing for your city. It's, you know, you're playing for the money. They got their team doctor. They're going to look you over like you're buying a used car. And, you know, they had all my medical records. So those came in, they took a look at that. And then one of my knees that was supposedly, you know, just a sprain that I played on my junior year, the team doctor looked at that and said, he actually called another doctor over and he goes, come here and look at this. This guy's knee swings like a door. And I figured that was probably a pretty bad sign. At that time, I had the 4 hospitalized concussions or, you know, doctor controlled concussions. And so they had already X'd me out because Steve Young was playing at that time still, and he had just retired for that same amount. So they're not going to take some, you know, college kid who hasn't even played for them at all yet that already has the same level of concussions as Steve Young. So I knew my day was kind of done at that point. And it was fun to at least get to go there and say I was invited, but there wasn't much chance that I was going to go anywhere else after that. I did sign an arena contract with the Arizona Rattlers, but I just, you know, playing on a basketball court, the concrete, and basically having a welcome home mat laid over the top of it to play didn't sound real great for all the injuries I had either. And so I just left that and went into family business then. But you talked about, you know, when I started seeing symptoms, and it's interesting because I really, you know, I think there were some of the things that I know now that are maybe symptoms, like some of the mood behavior things, like impulsivity and maybe some of the addiction stuff that kind of presented that I maybe didn't see initially. But I really didn't fully experience, you know, what I would call the textbook, you know, tests or / CTE type symptoms until around, you know, 2021. And that happened when my wife, unfortunately, had a real serious medical condition and was in the ICU for 17 days.
Wow.
And with that, I've since learned, I've talked to a couple leading neurologists that, you know, study TBI and specifically CTE. And they said, you know, sometimes the symptoms will come on from a trigger event. So it could be a divorce, a bankruptcy, a death. And that seemed to be kind of my case. And from there, really, that was in March. And I started noticing mood and behavior stuff, a lot of anxiety, explosive anger, was very short fuse, severe depression, like really dark. And I wasn't a dark person, but definitely felt that on a regular basis where, you know, I just couldn't get out of it, you know, couldn't get out of my own way, you know, the angel and the devil on your shoulders. And the devil had a better conversation was more convincing. I mean, it was like, why are you here? You're bringing your family down, that kind of thing. So I was, got to a pretty bad place. I had, systemic failures, like hormonal levels just crashed. I was having dysautonomia, which is, I would have just irregular sweating. I would have shortness of breath all of a sudden. I'd have spikes in my heart rate, just all these things that are involuntary actions. I was starting to have sleep issues. I wasn't breathing when I was sleeping. A lot of things that are pretty serious that, to happen all at once just really kind of I went, what is going on with this? This just does not make sense. None of this is me. They all seem to have one thing in common, the brain, because these are all things that are brain controlled functions. So, I need to kind of figure out what's going on. And then I started having, the cognition issues, and that, short-term memory was shot, couldn't identify people's faces, the names, those kinds of things. So went and saw my primary, told him about my history, and had done some research and said, I think this is where things are going. And then at the same time, I also just had a gut instinct that I needed to probably look into this some more. And so I got on Facebook and looked up the CTE and, Brain Injury Global Support Group that actually Chris Boyce founded. And I got in there and I, posted up about what was going on with me, and, just did a quick blurb about myself and when the symptoms started showing. And I got like 80 responses right out the gate. Just people, I get this, I have all these things too. This is exactly how it happened for me. And I've learned that really my age and my symptoms presenting is pretty much the textbook. If you were to go through and look at when this kind of takes shape, it usually can be up to a couple decades away from when you actually had the injuries. As the accumulation of these toxins and the tau get in there, that's really when it starts to present itself. So as soon as I got in that group, I felt right at home and knew, okay, this explains it, because I was tackling each of these symptoms kind of with different specialists, with doctors, and they were just operating within their world of being a specialist. But this finally put all these pieces together. I had ringing in my ears, but I had perfect hearing. Well, that turns out to be brain inflammation, that kind of thing. And you go, okay, now I can assemble the pieces and I have the full picture. So also, by grace of God, literally in the first day, one of the members told me about a clinical trial for football players at university. And it was using it's been around a while, but this was kind of experimental on suspected CTE and TBI. It's called photobiomodulation. And what that is the use of red and near infrared light, which is shined through intracranial to your brain. And what it does is it stimulates the mitochondria. It helps with oxygen flow. And they found that they were getting some really good results with this on some early testing and wanted to do a larger study. So I was part of the 50 guys that were involved in that. I reached out to them right away and said, hey, I want to be a part of this. Get me in somehow, some way. I can't live like this. And in July, I took my first flight out to Utah and started that process.
Awesome. Now, when you're going through this, was there hope because you now found out what you're up against and you're going to do all these different things to try to improve it? Or did you also hit a depression? I really hit a wall when I saw my scans and I saw the damage, and I had to be like, okay, I did really screw up my brain. So how did you take that? You seem like a very positive person and took it in a positive way.
Yeah, I mean, I think I blame that. I attribute that to my sports background. You deal with adversity, and as long as you have the information, you assess it, you figure out how to win. And I think that's carried with me. So I actually felt a sense of peace when I went in the group and found that I identified with people. And I think that's one thing that people would be surprised about. But I would say, don't battle this alone. The guys and women that struggle with this are people that isolate from their family with the mood and behavioral stuff, and they withdraw, and then they try to wrestle with this demon in their own head, and it gets sideways fast, like really fast. So, I mentioned that March to July, by July, I was at my worst. That's not very much time. In fact, you won't even be able to see a neurologist in that timeline.
Right.
So, I tell people, don't try to figure out what it is. Don't try to get a diagnosis, because even if it is CTE, that's just something that they write on paper. That's not going to change what you have to deal with. So, and on it right now. And that was really what my focus was, is what can I do that's going to slow or stop this? You know, give me time for them to, you know, science to catch up and figure it out. So
that's awesome. And you know what? And that's exactly one with the support group. I was really surprised. I don't reach out to other people usually. I didn't want to, like, in my mind, I was like, okay, I've done all these things. I'm not even going to think about CTE because you know, that's thinking about in the wrong direction. I just want to think about positive stuff and put it behind me. But when I did do that post, and when you encouraged me to share my video that I did, man, it was awesome. It felt so good to have all these people saying, hey, we understand, and you know, yeah, you can't forgive yourself, and all these different messages. And I was like, and then I realized, like, okay, and I could help other people. Because I think that's one of the big things that we want to do, is like, we know how much this sucks. We know what it does to our families. We know all this. We do not want it for, you know, anyone else. So if we could help another person, you know, and that alone is a great reason to be part of a support group, whatever you're dealing with, I believe.
yeah, exactly. I mean, it's a pretty raw group, as you've seen. We really open ourselves up, but you know, that is key with this. I mean, there's you have to share those places so people don't think everything's great and everything's fine. It's a lot of peaks and valleys. You know, you have days where it's great, and you have days where you can't even get out of bed. You know, there's days where my head is just pounding, you know, where I can't even almost see straight. But you know, I just think, you know, got to work through it. What did I do different? Stay with my routines, stay with my supplements, stay with my treatments. And I've gotten to a place where, you know, I've plateaued, and I'm not where I was. You have to kind of let that go, but I'm in a pretty good spot, and I'm thankful. I mean, I can have quality time with my family. You know, I can do well with a career and maintain a job, which is hard for many people with this injury and this condition, you know, and I think I got a pretty good life still, and I'm not thinking about when the end game is, you know. It's, you know, my thought is, you know, but everything's incurable at some point. You know, there's been some cancers that were incurable, and then, hey, somebody found a cure. You know, I mean, polio, all kinds of stuff have had this same specter over them in the past. And, you know, there's a lot of great people working on this, very intelligent people. So we just have to trust that, give ourselves time and try to do the best we can, and hope that they come up with something. So,
yeah, no, I think that's a wonderful way to look at it. Definitely how I try to look at it.
yeah.
Now, what are some of the things that helped you? And I know everyone's different. You know, I tried certain things that worked well for me. My wife tried something that didn't work for her. I know it's, you know, it's kind of a hit and miss sometimes. You don't know what will work. But what are some of the things that you tried and that seemed to help the most?
Well, I'll get back to the clinical trial that I did then, because I think that's something that I think is going to needs to be shared more and has a lot of promise. You know, being one of the 49 that were involved in that, we went into Utah, did our baseline testing. So that was great. We did an fMRI, we did cognitive testing, we did physical testing. I flew in the day before, and it was by far my worst day to that point. So I went in and did the physical testing. They had me get up from a chair, and I couldn't get out of a chair without using my hands. I actually fell back, and the girls caught me. You know, which they were really surprised. I don't think they'd had anybody do that before. You know, I couldn't do the one leg drunk test. You know, I was falling over, couldn't close my eyes and keep my balance. You know, that was just the physical side. The cognitive test, I was supposed to only be there for 2 hours to do all the testing, 2 to 3 hours. And I almost missed my MRI. I went in at 11, and my MRI was at 7. And I only had 15 minutes to spare. So it took me all day because I was stubborn, you know, and they told me, if you just are too mentally gassed, you can stop at any time. But I wanted to do the best I could and finish it out. So I did all these tests, but, you know, I like the cognitive tests, you had to like remember a list of like 8 words and then recite back as many as you could. I was doing like 2, maybe even one list. I don't even remember. I didn't remember any of them.
Wow.
So it was pretty intense. Went and did the scans, and then they gave me the device to use, which is it's an intracranial device with a intranasal piece that clips in, and it basically shines light on the brain. And was directed to use that once a day for 20 minutes for every other. And then they checked in on me kind of weekly to see how things were going. When I first got it, it kind of looked like Christmas lights, it's the LEDs. And I was like, you got to be kidding me. This can't be doing what they're saying it's doing. But about a week and a half, 2 weeks in, I started definitely noticing a difference. My mood was better. I mean, I was like singing in the shower, my wife's like, hey, what's going on? Who's this guy? And just was noticing cognition was better, energy level was better. My issues with like dropping things and balance and stuff around the house were better. And I was kind of surprised. I was like, wow, this is very early for this. 4 weeks in, I felt probably about 50% better. I was having no explosive anger. I was having none of the depression or anger issues that I'd had. And, going from that, we went, 8 weeks. I was like ready for like game time. Like I went in and did the testing, and like I was doing karaoke's and backpedaling for them, and just goofing off, just showing them that everything was dialed in, and standing on one leg way past when they wanted me to. And then I did the cognition test and smoked that, and the reaction times. And it's interesting because they just put out the results of the 49 of us, and all of us had significant, what they call in the science and data, significantly improved data for each of us. I think 46 of us for cognition, reaction time, and physical responses. So in addition to the mood and behavior scores were also great. So that's been the number one thing that I try to get people and encourage people to look into, because I think it's really cutting edge. A lot of people are looking at hyperbaric as well. There's Chris in our group is working on that right now. He's in that process, and some of the other members have gotten some really good response with that. And then natural supplements have been really great. I'm a big fan of natural supplements, because natural supplements, as opposed to some of these stacks and some of these synthetics, don't pass the blood-brain barrier. And if you can't get past the blood-brain barrier, then what's the point? I mean, you're not helping your brain at all. So that's really where I've been focused. If I could say the three that are what I think are most essential, that most people get the most response from, and I've seen the most publication on, I would say high dose omega-3, CoQ10, and lion's mane has been another fabulous one for the brain fog and the cognition. So
that's awesome. I still haven't done lion's mane, but yeah, omegas, I'm on those for sure. I have a pretty good regimen. I was like, okay, that seems to be helping. I will stick with it.
Nice.
Now, can you talk a little bit about your nonprofit?
Well, it's a big aspiration of mine. I'd love to make it a full-time profession if I can, but still I'm paying bills. I did get it up and started, but right now there's not really a website or content yet, but I appreciate you giving me the plug. What I've mainly been doing with it is kind of working behind the scenes, ex-athletes. I've been talking to a lot of NFL players, ex-college players, or anybody in between that reaches out. I have caregivers that come to me, and they tell me about their responses, and I'm not giving medical advice. I'm just sharing my story, and I just tell them, hey, this is what, we have 5,000 people in our group. This is what people are saying seems to be working for them. We're not pushing any pharma stuff whatsoever. We're just saying, here's natural alternatives, holistic options that you have, whether it's, Atlas Ortho Chiropractic, or, the HBOT, or, photobiomodulation, or the supplements. That's really what we try to help people with, because there isn't a whole lot out there about how to deal with this or treat it. And in fact, many times some of even the top neuro doctors are contacting us sidebar and going, hey, what have you been using that's working? What's reducing the inflammation for you? Because we're the pioneers right now. There isn't a whole lot known about how to deal with this, just that it's incurable, which is not real encouraging. So you got to get out and do your own research. I mean, I'm out on PubMed all the time, and all the other, Frontiers and all the other scientific journals I can, to try to find the most info to bring back to the group for the info share. And, that's kind of why I will say this about my nonprofit. I named it for CTE by CTE, because I believe that all of the big discoveries that are going to come from us. We know what we're feeling. We know how different things react in our bodies. We know what combinations are working. And, the academic community is going to probably need 5 to 7 years to catch up to us. So you don't have that kind of time to mess with this.
Yeah, I saw a response that Chris had to someone's question, and he said that we are the experts,
Yeah.
and not only that, but that it is like, you have to just battle the symptoms, and I go day to day, and luckily, man, I'm in a wonderful place. I rarely have things now. I feel wonderful. I was never as bad as so many others. Um, but it's still like every day, it's just take it day by day. And I think that's something, important for people to remember, like, okay, let's find these coping mechanisms. Let's find these things that help. Let's try to stay positive, reach out to others, and,
Yeah. Yeah.
we're all in it together.
Yeah, you definitely, I think you've learned this probably, is you break your day down to the pieces that you can handle. It's kind of like bites of your dinner, If you got to make it, if you can make the whole day, great. I never try to plan my whole week. I just kind of
Mhm.
plan maybe 2 days out, and if I can make one day, great. If it's a couple hours, okay, I deal with that. If it's 10 minutes, I know I need to mentally start thinking about using my toolbox and getting in there, whether it's, 4-7-8 breathing exercises, or reducing my stressors, or going for a, forest bathing, going for a walk, whatever it's going to do that's going to bring me down, pet my dog, to help me get the mood and the anxiety and some of the other things dealt with. But, it is, as you know, it's possible. If you get in a good routine and you stay really consistent and you put your health first, you can definitely get to a place where you'll start being very in tune with your body, and you'll know when things are going sideways. You'll know, oh, I've got inflammation. I didn't drink enough water. I was in the sun too long today. I shouldn't have had ice cream at 10 o'clock at night,
Mhm.
and you'll start realizing that some of these things are self-inflicted, that you can take those out of the mix and have a pretty good day if you didn't do those things. So,
Yeah. Yeah, that's
yeah.
great advice. And yeah, I just encourage everyone to take a good look at themselves and not just say, oh, that's just who I am. That's just how I am. That's just how it's going to be. It's like, no, we can, make those choices to improve our life as much as possible. But thank you so much for coming on and sharing your story. This
Yeah,
is
thank you.
awesome.
Thanks for having me.
Thank you for your work in the group. I encourage anyone that's dealing with CTE or a brain injury to check it out. And so again, the name of it, CTE and Brain Injury Global Support.
Correct. On Facebook. Exactly. It's a private group. So, your information isn't out there to the public. It won't be put across your friends' feeds. You don't need a membership card. If you think you have something going on with your brain, it's okay to go in there. And sometimes people come in and we help them figure out that it's something else that's actually a fixable thing, that, they walk away happy and going, wow, I've lived with this my whole life and didn't know that. So it doesn't hurt. If you think something's going on, be proactive.
Awesome, man. Well, again, thank you so much.
Same.
I'm sure we will be in touch on the group.
Right on. Thanks for
Awesome.
joining. Appreciate it. And hopefully we'll see some of your viewers there.
Awesome.
Going dark. Between my podcast, nonfiction writing, and conversations with new friends, I'm often accused of oversharing. Usually the accusations are from my wife, who's usually right. Hell, even most of my short stories are just a few hundred words away from the truth. However, the sharing is worth it if someone can learn from my mistakes or relate to some of the same weaknesses and warped thoughts that I possess. Plus, making stuff up is my job. If something I admit to ever leads to trouble, then I'll say I was just pretending. Prove I wasn't. Now that we're all on the same page, I can tell you why I'm sitting in this parking lot, pounding my second tea of the morning and puffing on a vape pen. And yes, I'm fully aware that this reveal just dropped my masculinity rating at least 3 notches. But I also know Final Float has a strict sober policy. I didn't drive an hour just to be turned away for smelling like a dirty hippie. The first time I'd come here, I didn't know what to expect. Afraid my paranoia might kick in, I'd only had 2 or 3 hits. My editor, Anthony, the guy who first recommended floating, had warned me not to get high. He said the sensory deprivation alone could lift my writer's block that felt more like a mountain and kickstart a scary story. And although Anthony didn't say it, I'm sure he was hoping it'd help me pull my head out of my ass with Unlocking the Cage, my book on MMA athletes. It wasn't just Anthony who thought floating would be good for me. A bunch of my jiu-jitsu friends claimed it was great for recovery, exactly what my broken down body needed. Even Irene, my therapist, said I should give it a shot, that she'd allow it to replace one of our weekly sessions. So keep all that in mind if you're the type of person who likes pointing fingers. There's no way one person's suggestion was going to convince me to do absolutely nothing for an hour with no light, sound, smell, and nearly no feeling. I had shit to do. Plus, not being able to write down story ideas drives me nuts. It's the reason I carry this pen and paper everywhere. Therapy without a prying shrink did sound better, though, and I figured the hour by myself would be an excellent time to work on my breathing. I'd just begun practicing yoga and was struggling with the concept of staying still. Do nothing and everything begins to happen. Talk to yourself. Quiet your mind. Allow the thoughts. Let them flow. Let them flood. Drown you. Hold you under. All right, enough of these thoughts. Let's take one last rip. Hold it. Hold it. Blow out all the bad thoughts with the smoke. The ones that make sleeping impossible. Now back to the first time. I barely smoked. Walked in, signed a release, and was shown to a room where I showered off, remembering at the last second to grab the earplugs off the shelf. I wedged the pink plastic into my ear, feeling oddly reassured that no sea slugs could slide into my ear canals and birth babies in my brain. I imagined the ones from Try Not to Die at Grandma's house that multiply when cut in half and scurry inside every orifice. I looked everywhere but couldn't find any extra earplugs, a guarantee my butt would stay clenched the entire hour. That's when I knew this whole thing was a terrible idea. My brain goes to the dark side the first chance it gets. And that's with just the audio muted. Once the lights were off, I knew I'd revert to being a scared little 6-year-old hiding under the sheets. I opened the small submarine-type door, and a relaxing white light tricked me into stepping inside the 6x8 tub, the salt water only reaching halfway up my shin. I closed the door behind me and eased myself in super slow because I'd just pictured myself slipping, cracking my head on the wall and drowning face down, a crimson halo fanning from my skull. The water was the same temperature as my body, the Epsom salt preventing me from sinking. I recognized that the experience could have been soothing if the air wasn't so thick it was like trying to breathe through a wet towel. Without warning, the lights blinked off, and panic nearly pulled me under. I blindly reached for the button and couldn't find it, suddenly afraid of what I might feel instead. I'd been stupid to smoke, my paranoia ramping up, my heart thumping so hard it rippled the water and thudded in my head. My breathing became ragged, and I worried that someone had accidentally hit the wrong switch and turned off the air. I was inches from the edge of an anxiety attack, but I wasn't ready to quit. I focused on the sensation of buoyancy. How I couldn't remember ever floating like this, not even as a child. How effortless it seemed, my lower half not dragging me down. My breathing eased as I spread out like a starfish, amazed at how much tension I was still holding on to. My breath began to flow and my body relaxed, my mind cutting in and out of the haze. My body did nothing, lost at sea, floating. One of the first lessons we taught our kids because of the pool. The fear of Jake drowning was the reason I wrote Safety First. My mind changed the channel, but not the genre. I began thinking that maybe what I was experiencing right then was what dying was like. Nothing but our soul, the real mind behind our brain. It's a scary thought, being left with only yourself. Why I'd seen so many people go nuts in solitary confinement. But in solitary, at least you can move. You can feel. What if all that were gone? No stomach rumbling, no itchy nose, no bumping into a wall, no TV, radio, phone, book, or person for a distraction. Nothing but yourself. If given a choice, I'd rather blink out of existence than face myself forever. But right then, both ideas bummed me out. All my life I'd been obsessed with death, fascinated by it, terrified of it, wishing it would hurry up and claim me, until now. Now I'm finally enjoying it and wanting to delay death indefinitely for me and my loved ones. The tears slipped into the water, my mind calculating how little life was left, even if we're lucky, but knowing none of us are. There could never be enough days, and death's a mean motherfucker. It doesn't give a shit if you're cute or ugly, kind or cruel, alone or loved. I got mad at myself for wasting time thinking about shit that would only depress me. I'd come here to work, to transform emotions into a story. Instead of blocking the demons, I opened their cage and told them to have at it. I unleashed my mind, and it came back with giant spiders descending from the ceiling, a lurker creeping between my legs, and the water rising while mustard gas pumped in from above. Everything a rerun. Something I'd read, seen, or written. What made it worse was I couldn't take full credit for my own scenes. How many had Anthony suggested or improved upon? He was the better writer. He went to college for it, and the reviews for Nick the Saint are higher than those for any of my books. Except Try Not to Die, which he co-authored with me. And now he was telling me unlocking could never work the way I was writing it, which meant I'd wasted over 2 years trying to piece it together. How could I come up with any new tales of doom and destruction when I had that shit weighing me down? My right hand balled into a fist, and no better than my son, I banged it into the bottom of the tub. Unbelievable pain shot up my arm and blasted my brain. I popped upright and bit back a scream as a splash of water burned my eyes. There was a spray bottle, a washcloth somewhere in the tub, but I went for the door, my hands frantically feeling the entire wall before smacking the handle. I found the shower, washed out my eyes, then rinsed off the 4-inch-long cat scratch down my right forearm, an angry red present from the day before. I powered up my phone because I was finished. I'd been in for less than 20 minutes, but I was done for the day. I swore I'd never come back. Yet here I am. Third time's a charm. Yes, I realize I skipped the second time, but that's because I hate telling that part. I know it sounds crazy, something even I wouldn't believe. Plus, it's time to head inside. It's such a beautiful day that I can't help feeling guilty Anthony won't ever see another one. 9 days after my first float was when I found out he had died. I'd been CC'd on an email sent from his wife. Heart attack. 36 years old and apparently healthy. Dropped dead teaching third period. As sad as his passing was, it wouldn't have been that big of a deal for me if I hadn't pried. I don't even know why I did. Everything got fucked up the moment I found out he died the same day I'd visited this place. And I only made things worse by bringing it up to Irene. I told her I knew I didn't have anything to do with Anthony's death, but I also made the mistake of saying maybe that sort of thing is possible. But we just don't know how to scientifically measure it yet. With all the meditation, yoga, and brain games, combined with the neurotrophics, maybe I'd tapped into that part of our brain we no longer use. Perhaps I'd opened new pathways. Irene looked at me like I was crazy. I told her I didn't say I believed that stuff. I was just saying maybe we don't know. What I did know was that blast of pain in the tub felt an awful lot like the rocket ride at the start of a DMT trip. Once Irene heard that, I couldn't backtrack. She made me return to final float, said I had to. I needed to conquer my fear and deal with the sad truth that my friend was gone. Not to mention how unhealthy it was for me to entertain a delusion that fueled my guilt. Knowing how much I detest being mentally weak, Irene asked point blank if I was too scared to try again. And before I could answer, she said she'd count it as 2 sessions with her. Yeah, that second time I'd been scared. You probably would be too if you thought you might have accidentally killed someone. But like I said before, I'm not going to get into it. That's all behind me, and today's a good day. I know I can handle the tank. All anxiety has been alleviated. I'm no longer scared of the dark. And the unknown has a way of revealing itself to those brave enough to explore it. The waiting room is beautiful, full of comfy couches to settle in. Donnie, the surfer-looking dude at the front desk, says, "What's up?" Doesn't say a word about me looking high as hell. It's only 10 in the morning, so maybe he thinks I'm still tired. Usually, I'm terrible with names, but Donnie's the same guy who cleaned up after my second visit. I hooked him up with a fat tip, and he never questioned my story about all the blood. Donnie says, "They're still readying my room. It'll be a few minutes." I say that's cool and head over to the couch, pretending I'm going to write something important on my notepad. I hate being on a phone, especially in this kind of place where everyone's trying to be all zen. But this is important. Writers are warned to never check reviews of their work, especially those by average Joes. But reviews are the lifeblood of an independent author. You should always keep an eye out for those that would do you harm. I click on the 1-star reviews. Fortunately, a small group to choose from. Looks like only one of the Joes has the courage to use his real name. It is quite possible that Mr. Painter simply does not care for my work, something I totally get. There are plenty of talented authors that I'll never read because of my varied interests. I'm guessing, however, that this guy has a habit of being toxic and spreading negativity. Donnie calls me, says room 6 is ready. I palm my phone and try to tread quietly down the hallway, but my sandals slap with every step. Inside the room, I lock the door, get undressed, and stack my clothes on the bench. I'm skipping the shower because I doubt they have cameras and I want to get started. I throw in the earplugs and pick up my wallet. I'm careful not to cut myself when I reach behind my business cards and slide out the razor blade. I've carried one all my life because you never know when it might come in handy. This is the same one I used in the last session. Sort of a lucky charm. While working as a correctional officer, I got to see just what these bad boys can do. I watched one guy bleed out on his toilet. Just sat there looking at me, his femoral artery pissing away his life. Another guy gave himself the widest smile ever, only 6 inches too low. The guys with no imagination always went for their wrists. But that's not my thing. To be completely honest, I do enjoy teasing the tip over those places, the vital spots where one simple slice could end it all. But that's not where I cut myself. Who are we kidding? We all knew I'd get into the details of my... On trip 2, I'd only been in the tank about 10 minutes when I let the blade do its little dance, dragging it out so I could finalize my thoughts, crystallize Irene's face, the look that said she thought I was crazy. Part of me felt awful, the other part foolish. There are plenty of people that I wouldn't mind seeing dead, but there wasn't anyone I'd wish it on. The new peaceful me tries not to hate, and really, what's the rush when we're all headed to the same place? However, I'm human, and I needed to know what I was capable of, what we as a species are capable of. And Irene wrote things down that could incriminate me, or at least set me up for some nasty blackmail. So yeah, Irene seemed like a decent person who probably didn't deserve it, but I'd already come so far, had the tip of the razor pressed against my ribs, an inch below the water's surface. I started my mantra. She wasn't a friend. She wasn't a person. She was an enemy that could destroy me and my family. At the height of my fury, I nicked my skin, but couldn't control my reaction, the blade scraping bone when I jumped. With the lights on, the tub looked like a living lava lamp, my blood spreading throughout the solution. Crazy glue did the trick, and I got away with no stitches. Irene didn't fare quite as well, but like I said, she was the one who forced me to go. My therapy with her was court-ordered, so it was never like I had a choice. But with Mr. Painter here, there was an ethical dilemma. I don't even know the man. That's why I had to be extra sure and read some more reviews. It's what I figured. Painter's your typical troll, loathing everything that displeases him. It's crazy how much you can find out about someone in just a couple of clicks. I'm pretty sure I only need his name and face, but I don't want to be irresponsible. And I'll need all his info when I check in on him later today to see if he still has a heartbeat.